Ernie Grimo from the Grimo Nurseries, and he's going to talk about hot callus pipe grafting in Ontario. Ernie? Well, one other thing, we're going to go into the break time a little bit, so play catch up to get back on schedule by the end of the break. So we'll figure out how long you have for a break, but it won't be as long as a half an hour. Okay.
I would like to start with asking a question. How many people here were born after 1968? Look at that. I asked that question because when I attended my first meeting in 1968 of the NNGA organization, I walked into the auditorium and all I could see was white hair. So it's good news to see that we have a young generation coming along that has the interest in nut growing, and chestnuts are part of nut growing too, and I'm glad to see that the two organizations are working together. As I said, my first meeting was in 1968. It was in Painesville, Ohio. It was also the first year that I collected budwood and grafted my first tree. I still have that tree. It's a Bowser black walnut, and it's doing just fine out in my orchard. Now getting on to hot pipe callus grafting. I've been corrected on that. It's not hot callus for some reason. It is hot pipe though. And to understand hot pipe callus grafting, we need to know the science behind it. We have to understand how the cambium performs in a tree before we can understand how grafting works. The cambium is a thin layer. Imagine it to be as thin as a layer of plastic. It's located in between the inner bark and the sapwood, and its function is to cause the tree to grow thicker. In other words, in diameter. Branches, roots, the trunk, they all grow bigger in diameter because of the cambium. The cambium is the only part of the trunk or the branches that actually can divide. And once those cells are set, they don't divide any longer. The sapwood, doesn't produce any new cells itself. It's the cambium that does all of that. The idea of hot callus pipe grafting was first tried in 1980. It was based on the premise that the cambium of most trees is easily awakened from dormancy, even in winter. Since the cambium can be actually activated on any part of the tree without affecting the rest of it, we can set the proper temperature and humidity to meet the requirements of the tree. In our case, it would be the place where we want the union to form. For the buds on the scion to remain dormant, as well as the rest of the rootstock, they must not be in the heated pipe, but in a cold above temperature area to keep them dormant. I first heard about hot pipe grafting in 1983 when Dr. Harry Lagerstedt, the predecessor of Dr. Sean Mellenbacher, presented a paper at the NNGA And it's in the volume 75 of our nut growers annual report, page 158 to 165. He mentioned using a 2-inch slotted pipe that, slotted pipe where the trees would be placed on top of that pipe. Inside the pipe would be the heating cable, and that would cause the heat to rise to 24 degrees, 80 degrees Fahrenheit in a period of 3 weeks. I tried this. I tried everything that I found out about each year I came to the Nut Growers Association. In fact, there wasn't a year that I didn't learn something over those 56 years. I covered the roots with peat moss and a foam plastic cover over the pipe to hold the heat in. It was just an ordinary gardening heating cable. It probably turned off at 72 degrees. I had no idea what I was doing because I had not one take. And I decided that it was a dumb idea. It caused a lot of extra work, and I gave it up. Basically, I didn't control the temperature or the humidity, and that's the whole reason for all my failures. Walnuts require 80 degrees Fahrenheit to be successful grafts. And a lot of the other species, that temperature works for them too. Well, actually, in November of 2022, Linda and I were visited by a pair of men. I think of them as my shining knights. Ernie Grimo was from the Netherlands, and Lars Westergaard from Denmark. They explained how they did their grafting using the hot pipe and how to control the environment on the pipe. Ernie was getting 95% takes, and he was concerned about why 5% failed. Ernie and Lars explained that the pipe did not need to be slotted, that they could fit a lot more trees on a pipe if they simply took the pipe and slit it straight down the middle into 2 halves, an upper half and a lower half. Then you could fit as many trees as you want on the pipe. I was able to get on a 12-foot pipe 120 trees. Anyway, they suggested to save space, the 3 levels could be developed to set up the pipes. From this beginning coaching, I was on my way. I immediately went to work and bought 3-inch drain pipes, standard drain pipes, and my helper, Armando, he was capable of handling the sawing and cut them in half. And he also was responsible for building the stands that we used. 3 levels, 2 on top, 1 on the floor. And in that situation, we could get almost 500 trees on. The electric cable we used had to be specific. It's hard to buy an electric cable without a thermostat control on it. So what we had to do was to find somebody that produced a cable that would go above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, because most of the heating cables used for melting snow and ice and so on only go up to 50 degrees and then they shut off. So I found a company in Edmonton, Canstall is the name of the company, and they assured me that their cables would go up to 80 degrees and higher even. So with that, we were set with the cable. We placed the cable with loose ties because that cable will expand 3 or 4 inches in the time it goes from room temperature up to 80 degrees. We also found that we needed to put drain pipe insulation cut in half on the pipes. If we didn't use the drain insulation, we could not get the temperature up to 80 degrees. We tried it, actually, without the insulation, and we couldn't get it anywhere close in the cold barn, where the cold barn would be 32 up to maybe 45 degrees, depending on the weather outside. We taped the insulation onto the drain pipe. Then we decided that it was a good idea to lay down a tarp. That would help to hold everything together. We put the pipe in the center of it, and we filled it with a mixture of sand and perlite. The sand would help to be a heat reserve for the pipe, and the perlite would help to hold moisture. We would cover the mixture with a sheet of cloth just to prevent mixing afterwards. And let's see, whoops. In our grafting situation, Ari liked to use a standard splice graft. He said it was faster than a whip and tongue graft, and it was very accurate as far as he was concerned. He liked to call it a whip graft. He's a little bit OCD. We discussed the difference between a whip graft and a splice graft, and it turns out that it's actually the same thing. But I like to call it a splice graft because whip and tongue is another way of describing a different graft, and I didn't want to confuse the terms. Now, this is a machine I used that I do use, and I'm the grafter for the company. I grafted 5,500 trees this year. And I used this this style of graft. The wedge is made so that I can graft anything, or at least I can cut any scion from 1/4 inch right up to 3/4 inch in size, and it works with a nice smooth edge that when it's placed into the cleft, and I make the cleft with a knife, the cleft, and it fits smoothly on both sides. We, of course, have to match the cambium in each case. Otherwise, there's no graft to take. This is how I do my grafts. I can make a graft complete from cutting the scion to placement, and it takes me about 2 minutes. So the machine has been a great advantage to me. And I've had the machine for at least 40 years. And not that machine, but an earlier model that I copied from. It had the same design, and I had 10 of those machines made, and I sold most of them. One of them was demonstrated here at the NNGA meeting a couple of years back by my daughter Linda. I tried getting more made, and I can't get anybody to make the blades. The company that made the blades for it was a knife manufacturing company, and the blades had to be so precisely made that nobody wanted to make them. Because once the blades were hardened, you couldn't bend them. They're just simply set the way they are, and they had to be just right for the grafting machine to work. So I'm afraid I'm out of the grafting machine sales business. Now, we covered the pipe with the trees. You can see how they're laid across the pipe. And then we used an Inkbird thermostat to control the temperature. It's very important that this sensor is placed correctly on the pipe to make it work correctly. We plugged the heating cable into the unit, then the heating cable, then the thermostat is plugged into a GFEP ground fault protector, because we had to be sure that if there was a problem with the cable and it caught fire, or we had any issues with overheating, it would turn it off. Now, the regular GFCI units wouldn't work so well because they would cut the current at 5 milliwatts. The GFEP will go up to 35 milliwatts before it cuts the power. And that's an advantage in case you want to protect your trees from dying, from lack of electricity and heating. And this came from the Gullivan Electric Company supply. They were the only ones that I could find that had a unit that you could put together and use. Each of the 3 stands would be connected to one of these GFEP units. Now, once the trees are laid down and ready to be set, we put the pipe over top, the cover pipe. It acts as a humid chamber, and it is also insulated. We cover that with, we can use sawdust, but we like to use peat moss. I don't trust sawdust indoors or actually outdoors. I had a spontaneous fire that started one time. I used peat moss, sawdust as a cover over top of potted trees, and it was in the middle of the night that the sawdust caught on fire spontaneously, I'm assuming. My neighbor heard the sparkling and wondered what it was and went to look out and gave us warning that there was a fire at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm still thanking her for going to her back window and seeing this fire. Okay, after we had them covered with we cover everything, roots, pipe, and this is what it looks like when we've got it all covered. We cover that pipe with a sheet of plastic. The first time we tried using concrete insulation strips, and that would be an insulated blanket that we put over top, but I was afraid that the insulated blanket would keep too much heat in and maybe spread it to the cyan and get it starting to leaf out. So we went with clear plastic afterwards. So This is what 3 layers looked like when we first did it. Those are the insulated blankets on top. We made sure that the trees were well wetted underneath to maintain the humidity. We also, with the clear plastic, we could see if there's water droplets on the plastic underneath and know that it was doing its job and keeping the high humidity there. And this is what 5 of our stands look like. That represents 1,800 trees. And if you look at the second one, you can see there's some white on the top. One row here, that had the pipe removed, and this is what it looks like up close. Those are not grafts growing. Those are suckers from the rootstocks. And we have to remove them from the pipe and remove the suckers at the same time. This is what the callousing looks like on a heart knot. It surprised us how readily the grafts took like this. And that was with 24 days on the pipe. The covering on the scions was paraffin wax, and that's why the wood has a funny look. If you look closely, you can see that a couple of buds are already swelling. And this is what they looked like near the end of April. Beginning of April. It was still in the cold barn, and a lot of the heart nuts and walnuts had started to leaf out, even in the cold. And temperature in the barn at that period of time was probably between 40 and 50 degrees. But they still started growing on me with no understanding of why. Once the conditions outside were mild enough, and this spring it was pretty mild even in early April, we had them out, I think, in the first week of April, and this is how they looked outside. If we had any concern about a frost, we would drag them straight inside. We had them all on skids so they could easily be moved inside. But we needed the inside of the barn for the bare root trees that we were digging about this time. So they had to be outside, and they seemed to stand that quite well. Most of our trees were dug in the fall, and we found that black walnut and persimmon rootstocks did not perform well as bare root trees when we planted them in the ground. So we decided to pot them and then graft them a year later. So they were put on blocks for the first year in those bottomless containers, and air pruned the roots so that they would develop a better root system inside the pot. And we fussed with a number of different kinds of pots, because the ones like the black pots, if you wanted to take the tree out, you had to turn it upside down and bang it out. Well, by then you disturb the roots, and what's the point? So we decided that it was better to use our plantra tree shelters, and we stapled them together, and before putting them in the ground, the staples were removed, they were put in the ground, and the plantra shelter was taken off, and that made a much better situation for our trees. This is what they looked like when we planted them. The first 2 rows are pawpaw, one-year-old pawpaw seedlings. We use plantra tree shelters and other makes sometimes on the tops. The trees in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rows are walnuts and heart nuts. We like the tree shelters because it keeps the tree growing straight, and it gives them some shelter during the early years of their growth. The tall containers, tall tubes have mulberries in them. Mulberries are ridiculous at growing fast, and this is what they looked like a week ago. You'll see that some of the heart nuts and walnuts are already above the tree shelters. Those are 2-foot tree shelters. The 6-foot tree shelters with the mulberries on them, you can see there's a few of them that are coming out of the tops as well. The advantage of hot callus pipe grafting is by far the best way of a commercial orchard being produced. Commercial nurserymen producing trees. And these are the advantages that we see. We only heat the graft area. The cambium remains active only on the area where we're grafting. It extends the grafting season for the whole winter. And I could even, in fact, I'm planning on starting in the late fall because the trees are dormant then, and I won't have a problem with bleeding with black walnuts. The potted black walnuts tend to bleed, where the bare root ones don't. So I'm trying to get around that situation, and I think by grafting earlier, there'll be less chance of sap flow. Higher success rate with hard-to-graft species has been demonstrated. Scion buds and rootstock remain in cold, dormant condition. We said that. Grafts grow with greater vigor and few after planting failures. So that's something we noticed quite remarkably with our grafting. And of course, with heating pipes, you're not using very much electricity. And the room you're working in stays cold. And thank you.
Great job, Ernie. Do we have any questions for Ernie? Got a question over there.
Yes, Jim.
Boy.
Ernie, have you had to add moisture inside the pipe at all?
I'm afraid of wetting the grafts because I think water creates problems. But highly humid moisture, water vapor in other words, is what the tree needs. I'm not sure if I follow what you're saying, but we put heating cables on the top pipe too. And I think that was a mistake because radiated heat dries out the scion and the rootstock. It dries out the graft rather than actually just heating it. So we're going to eliminate using the heating cable on the top half and only the one on the bottom. We thought it was an insurance thing, that if we had 2 heating cables, if one failed, we still had heat, but that isn't something we wanted to do. Yes?
Did you put wax on the entire piece of scion wood or just the end?
I used paraffin wax on the scions when I collected them. I dipped them in, I have a deep fryer that I fill with wax, paraffin wax, high temperature paraffin wax, and, low temperature paraffin wax. And I dipped the whole scion. I cut the scions in sticks 12 inches long, dip them and turn them over and dip them again. Ari Brun used to wax his, and then he stopped doing it. And he said, it doesn't help to wax them. So I only waxed mine because he was potting his trees right away after they were off the pipe. I hold mine for 2-3 months in the cold barn before they are outside, and another month or so before they're planted. I was afraid that the scion might dry out in the meantime. It may be a mistake to be concerned about that.
Ernie, a question over here.
Yes.
I probably missed this, but how long do you keep them in the pipe?
Between 21 and 27 days, depends on the species. And with looking through the end of the pipe, we can check and see if there's much growth inside. If we get lots of growth and the scions look like they've healed, then we take the pipe off.
Okay, one more question. Does anybody have?
Yes.
Do you put rubber bands on the jugglins and carriers?
You know, I don't. I use just the masking tape. But I think from now on I'm going to try rubber strips on the graft instead of the masking tape. I like the masking tape because you don't have to take the rubber strip off afterwards. I'm lazy.
Okay, if you have other questions, seek out Ernie at the meeting here.